Oh, yeah. Okay. So I was diagnosed with GHSV1 when I was 19 years old back in 2013. So it was quite some time ago. And HSV1, if anyone who knows anything about herpes, HSV1 is normally considered the better herpes. It's considered cold sores. But what a lot of people don't know, myself included when I was 19, is that herpes HSV1 can be spread from cold sores down to genitalia when you partake in oral sex. I had no idea. And I ended up with cold sores, but in a different location.
Wow. So saying that at the age of 19, and let's be honest, that's your finished high school, going to university or college, it's your party years in a sense. So how did that make you feel when you first got diagnosed going into your party years?
So the worst part about it was I was dating the same guy for 2 years, and I knew he got cold sores. So like I said, we were both really young. Sex education is not great. So neither one of us knew it spread that way. And it had healed up. So we were like, okay, we're fine, but it didn't heal enough. So when I first got symptoms of it, I didn't even think it was herpes. I didn't think it was any type of STD because me and my boyfriend were both losers. We didn't really go out a lot. We kind of just hung out with each other. So whenever we weren't at school or work, we were with each other. So I'm like, there's no way he could have cheated on me unless he's like Houdini. So I was utterly convinced it was not an STD. I figured out it was an STD. He didn't understand it. So he broke up with me. He thought I cheated on him. We reconciled since then. It's all water under the bridge at this point. But I was devastated. I was getting to the suicidal point. I was very, very upset because I knew nobody who had it. I thought I was going to be this leper of society, that nobody was going to ever like me again. And I was seeing all these people partake in hookup culture. And I'm like, I can't do that. I have like these rules that I have to follow. And I was very, very devastated. I was very upset.
Wow. So you mentioned something key, because a lot of people, again, it's that stigma of it's really because someone cheated on somebody and that's how you develop herpes. Do you know how you got it up until this point, or is just something that just happened, to be honest with you?
So basically, when you have a sore is when you're the most contagious. However, when people have sores either down south or on their mouth, you kind of know to avoid being in contact with somebody else. So what people don't realize is you can spread herpes without any signs or symptoms, or when it's the day before or like the day right after when it heals up, like, and it looks okay. People don't realize you can spread it that way. So you're more likely actually to get it from like a long-term partner who doesn't know his status, because you're sleeping with them while they're asymptomatically shedding. Where if you're just hooking up with someone, if you see someone with a sore, you're going to be like, oh, maybe I don't want to hook up with that person. You know, if you see it, you're going to be more wary of it. So I was dating him for 2 years. He never really got cold sores all that often. He just happened to have one, I think, in the 2 years that we were dating. And that's how I ended up getting it.
Gotcha.
So.
Oh, wow. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah. It's something that I never really, like you said, like it's something that we don't really talk about in society until it actually happens to you or happens to someone that you're close to and they decide to disclose that information to you. So when you first got it and you first got diagnosed with it, you mentioned all these emotional tolls that you're going through. Was it strictly just your partner at that time that you decided to tell, or did you reach out to find more information, doctor visits, family, friends, stuff like that for that moral support?
So when I had the textbook first outbreak, your first outbreak usually is accompanied by a fever or the flu. So I had the flu for the first week, and then right afterward, I thought I had a UTI. Turns out it was not a UTI, it was herpes. So I got medication for a UTI, and then I started developing sores, and I went back to my doctor, and I'm like, listen, something else is going on. I don't know what's happening. And that's when she diagnosed me. I was lucky. I had a really good doctor. Some doctors are really judgmental and really rude about it. My doctor she explained to me that it's not as big of a deal as I'm thinking it is. And I have HSV1, which is what most of the population, like I think around 60% of the population in the United States has HSV1, whether it be cold sores or down south. So she's like, you have the more common ones. You're more likely to find other people who already have it. I was lucky enough to have that, because I've heard horror stories from people who messaged me on TikTok who their doctors are like, well, this is what happens when you don't wait till marriage. And that's a doctor saying that. So I was very lucky with that. I reached out to my boyfriend. I told him And that didn't go well. Like I mentioned earlier, that didn't really go well for me. And then after that, I kind of didn't tell anybody for a long time. I told my sister because she's 4 years younger than I was. So I wanted to warn her to like, don't be like me. You know, like I was doing, I didn't do it in a scientific-y, like, oh, okay, this is herpes. I was doing it like, this is your warning. Yeah. So I was a mess. It was a really rough couple of months. And then I finally told one of my friends because I was like, they asked me what was wrong because they knew that I was not being myself. I was being very isolated, withdrawn from everything. And I told them, and they were like, they weren't judgmental. They had no idea anything about it. And I knew no information about it to give them. So they're just kind of like, okay, well, Lauren has this thing now. And that was really it. And probably the second person I told was a guy I started dating. I was probably like a month or two after I got diagnosed. Someone asked me out on a date and I went on it. And I'm like, this is just terrible. I shouldn't even be going on this date. And he ended up being the like third person I told. And that actually went pretty well. So,
oh, that's good.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something as well that's quite interesting because trying to think of the right words of saying this. Usually when, again, this is just my train of thought or my opinion in regards to that, someone gets diagnosed with an STI, STD, whatever it might be, they really just really, as you mentioned, go and isolate themselves somewhere for like a while.
Yeah.
You went a month.
Yeah, well, I was at, I just started a new college. I didn't have any friends really at this new college. I had like one friend. All my other friends lived far away. So I was like home alone a lot. And someone on campus asked me out on a date. And I hadn't gone out in a full month pretty much. I hadn't gone anywhere. I'd go to work. And I was like skipping school like crazy because I was so depressed. I wasn't going nowhere. And I'm like, you know what? I need to do something because this is not good for my mental health. So I ended up going out on a date. I would recommend to anybody who's diagnosed to not do that because I just kind of threw myself into a relationship. And luckily I ended up with a nice enough guy because you could end up with someone who's very manipulative and you're not comfortable with yourself yet and you end up stuck because you're like, no one else will love me. Because I stayed in that relationship way longer than I should have. Not that he was a bad guy, we were not compatible, but I stayed in that situation for way longer than I should have because I was afraid to disclose, to do the whole thing over again. So I recommend you kind of learn to accept it yourself before throwing it at someone else. Also, disclosing is so much easier when you're a little bit more comfortable because my disclosure the first time it was so bad. It was so bad.
It's like, hey, I'm Lauren, I have herpes. Let's go.
I was like the full waterworks. I was like, I have this disgusting disease. I'm gross. Like everything you're not supposed to do in a disclosure. I did, and I knew no information about it. I knew nothing. So I was just like, I have herpes. I was crying, and it was bad. So I recommend don't doing that. Wait a little bit, learn to accept yourself before expecting someone else to accept you. That's with everything, not just herpes. That's any type of insecurity you might have.
I'm glad you said that because that's exactly where I was going with that. I'm just like, a month seems like quite a short period of time for someone to fully understand something, a stigma that's not really talked about. And then
I knew nothing.
Yeah. And then to go from that, you really have to understand the pros, the cons, the ins and outs of these things. And again, back then, like the information on the internet wasn't, I'll say, not the greatest.
I didn't even have a smartphone. It was 2013. I still had, I had the Juke cell phone. Like, I don't know if you remember it. It was like a flip phone. It had T9 texting. That's what I had in 2009. That was a little bit, I was behind the times, but like I had no, Reddit was barely a thing. There was no herpes forums. There was no Positive Singles as a dating app for herpes people. That wasn't really a thing. It was bad. Like that was the only information was directly from the CDC, the World Health Organization, and like these very terrible sites that just said, okay, you have herpes, so you're going to die alone. So it was bad. Yeah, 2013 is a dark time.
Still love the 90s, though. I'm a 90s.
Of course. But, you know, not for finding out our herpes information.
So you mentioned that you're with somebody. I don't know if you're still with that person or not. I think you said you guys are or aren't. I'm not too sure. But saying that, was it hard? I guess it wasn't hard for him to accept it, like that you had that herpes with you, and understanding the consequences, if there's any, because I've seen on TikTok and I've read about it as well, that if people decide to have kids, that becomes an issue, that the kids can and cannot have herpes, or they might die from it. So I don't know, I don't know if you have kids or not, or you said
no, I don't have any children. But actually, so that's a misconception with herpes.
Mm-hmm.
So infants, it is deadly. If an infant gets herpes, it's deadly. It's not good. So that's why they recommend to everybody, don't let anybody kiss your baby, because cold sores are, like I said, 60% of the population has cold sores. So if your aunt, uncle, cousin, whatever it is, kisses your baby on the mouth and gives them herpes, it's not good for infants, lethal. Genital herpes, however, if you are aware of your status and you have an open communication with your OBGYN and you have a birthing plan, they put you on antivirals, usually in your last trimester, to make sure you don't have any viral shedding, and you can have completely natural childbirth with absolutely no issue. And if you are still very concerned about it, you have a C-section, it's completely, as long as it doesn't come in skin-to-skin contact with the area that has herpes, your kid cannot get it. So I think it's 1 in 100,000 births, the infant ends up getting herpes from the mother. And in those cases, it's almost like 90% of the time, it's the mother had no idea they had herpes. And so they didn't take the proper precautions. So that's why they do, in most cases, test pregnant women for herpes before giving birth, so they can add that as part of the birthing plan. Yeah.
Well educated, and I love it.
Yeah, I've been doing the TikTok for like 2 years now, so I've done a lot of research. As far as telling partners, so my current boyfriend, we were friends for 10 years before we started dating, which was actually part of the reason why we put it on hold for so long, was because I always had these rules for who I dated and who I slept with. And a lot of the rules were no one in my friend group, no one near my friend groups. I didn't want anyone to find out I had it. It was like a big secret. But I went through my hoe phase after herpes. Like I got diagnosed, and like I said, I was 19. So I ended up going through a hoe phase after I was already diagnosed. Disclosing, like I said, is not as scary as everyone makes it out to be. You just have to be confident. You just have to have a little bit of information to talk to the person. I've disclosed around 25 times, not to out myself on the hoe scale, but that's the running joke on my TikTok all the time, is people comment, "Oh, you're a slut, that's why you got herpes." And I'm like, no, the really irony of it, I became a slut after. Like I was not a slut before, I became one after. Like it's backward. So it is possible. I mean, it's about whatever you're comfortable with, obviously, but it is possible to sleep around, to do your thing, and still tell people and disclose. Transmission from females to males, or female genitalia to male genitalia, is less than male to female. So that might help me out a little bit. Yeah, so it's, I think mine, with no signs or symptoms, I think my transmission rate is under 1% or 1% of transmission if I don't have any signs or symptoms. So, and yeah, sorry, continue.
Yeah, continue. Go ahead.
I just keep going. I won't shut up. That's not, so the thing too about if you date someone with herpes, which is better than dating someone who doesn't know their status, any little tiny thing I'm looking out for. So I'm looking out for little tiny bumps that other people might just write off as, oh, this is a razor bump, or this is a heat rash. I'll be looking at it, be like, okay, nope, we're going to wait a day. I'm going to see how this goes. There's also ghost herpes symptoms. They're called prodrome symptoms. I call them ghost herpes. It's when you are virally shedding and your body gives you like some signals, but the signals are invisible to your partner. So I'll get lower back pain, and that could be a sign that I'm virally shedding, which is a sign that I could spread herpes to someone. So if I have lower back pain, I'm like, you know what? Let's wait a second. Let's just see what this is. Also, there's like a weird tingling sensation in your skin. It's really hard to describe, but there's like a tingle sensation in your skin. I look out for that. If I feel that tingling sensation, I'm like, okay, let's just hold off. Let's see if this, and then that keeps my partner much safer than because if you don't know you have herpes, you're just like, oh, I have lower back pain. I went to the gym too hard yesterday, and you'll have sex and end up spreading it to someone else.
That's true. You just got to watch out for those spidey senses.
Yeah, basically it's the spidey sense, the herpes sense.
Exactly. the more you talk, the more you kill my questions, but I love it.
I'm so sorry.
I love it. It's okay.
I just took over your podcast. I'm sorry.
Oh, I love this. You're a very energetic, fun type of guest, and I'm pretty sure you have a tons of story that you could tell me or everybody else. So I'm really enjoying this. This is awesome. It's nice to just sit back and just be like,
It's been 9 years. I've had it for 9 years at this point. So it's like, it's almost every adult experience I've had being diagnosed. So it's like, yeah.
So now I need to know, well, I don't need to know, but
of course,
is there your good days versus bad days?
Yeah.
And what is
especially, well, you're talking about like outbreak symptoms or mental or both?
Outbreak.
Outbreak. Okay, so yeah, so herpes is a virus. So your first year or so, depending on your immune system. So herpes is directly correlated with your immune system. So if you have a bad immune system, or if you're immunocompromised, herpes is going to affect you a lot worse than someone who's not. There's also a matter of if you take medications or supplements. There's like a whole list of natural supplements you can get over the counter that can help you out. There's also antivirals you can get prescribed by a doctor, and that'll help lower your outbreak rate. But for everyone, it seems like a general consensus, myself included, your first year is your worst year because it's your body building up the antibodies to fight off herpes. So my first year, I was having an outbreak a month, usually around the time of my time of the month, because that's when girls, their immune system is kind of lower during their time of the month. So I ended up getting an outbreak with my time of the month, which was just not a good week for me. And then the year after that, it was only when I was really stressed out, because whenever you're stressed, your immune system tends to get lower. So when I was stressed, I'd also get one. Then it started getting less and less. I went 5 full years with no outbreak at all. That's the same for a lot of people, especially people with GHSV1. It seems to be a little bit less prevalent, like the outbreaks seem to be a little bit less. But for everyone I know, as the years go on, your outbreaks get more spread out and smaller in size and just like symptoms. So that's good. So it's like, they always say herpes is forever, but it is forever, but it's like over time, it kind of gradually slows down a little bit. And of course, my first outbreak in 5 years was right after I got COVID. So my body went through a severe shock, of being really sick. I was really sick with COVID for a week. And right after that, I got an outbreak, which makes sense because my immune system was shot.
Crap.
So it broke my 5-year streak, which I was a little upset about, because I was like, 5 whole years, that's great. And then I got one. So my first outbreak, your first outbreak is your absolute nightmare outbreak. That's the one that they warn you about in health class a lot of the times. It's like, it's painful, it's big, it's like awful. And that makes the depression even worse, because it's like, this is how it's going to be for the rest of my life. And it's not. Every outbreak I've had after that has been much smaller. The one I just had in August didn't even itch. The telltale sign of herpes is that it's supposed to be itchy and gross, and it wasn't even that. It just existed. And I was like, all right. So like I said, it gets easier over time. But cool. Yeah.
You keep having these letters, and I think you call it GSH1.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I should probably explain the acronyms.
Yeah.
So HSV is herpes simplex virus. There's 2 main strains. There's actually 8 different herpes strains, in case you're wondering. Only 2 of them are the STI. It's HSV1 and HSV2. It used to be the distinguishing between the 2 numbers is HSV1 was mouth, HSV2 is down below the belt. However, because our generation really loves to put each other's genitals in each other's mouths, HSV1 is severely on the rise. It's like 60% of new genital herpes cases are HSV1, ironically. G stands for genital, and then O stands for oral. So if I say I have GHSV1, that means I have genital herpes simplex virus 1. Other people say I have GHSV2, which is genital herpes simplex virus 2. So
could you have GO? HSV1,
so I actually, ironically, okay, so this is where it gets a little confusing scientifically wise. So let's say you've never had herpes in your entire life, and the first time you get herpes, it's HSV2. If you have HSV2, your body builds the antibodies for HSV1. So you almost really, really hard for you to get HSV1 if you have HSV2 first. It doesn't work the other way around. If you have HSV1 first, you can still get HSV2. So that works that way. If you have it in one spot, it's really hard to get it in another spot because your body internally has the antibodies. unless in my case, I was exposed to HSV1 in both spots simultaneously because I got it from oral sex. So most people aren't practicing oral sex without also making out with the guy. So I ended up getting oral HSV1 and genital HSV1. So I have both. It is what it is. But yeah, but people are always very concerned about giving it to themselves. So like if I have if you are a normal person who just got the one, if you have an outbreak, people are really worried about it. Oh, if I accidentally touch my outbreak and then I touch somewhere else, can I give it to myself? It's really hard to auto-inoculate yourself because your body has the antibodies for it. So you kind of, yeah.
So saying all this, what is your advice for, I guess, everyone out there? Because it seems like, again, it's that stigma. And after everything that I've been hearing, it's more of a, not really a be careful, but be educated.
Yeah, be educated for sure. So the main thing for people who don't have herpes to understand is herpes is a silent virus for a lot of people. It's like 80% of people, according to the CDC, it's like 80% of people who have herpes don't even know they have it because they never have a sign or a symptom. So you could be asymptomatic your entire life. The thing about that is they don't recommend testing for herpes. So if you go into a clinic and say, okay, I want the works, give me an STD panel. Herpes is not included unless you have a sign or a symptom of it, because I have to take blood. I have to take a blood test for it. The other thing too is, let's say you sleep with someone and you find out later, ooh, that person seems a little sketchy. I should probably get tested. Herpes will not show up in your blood until 12 days after your encounter. So if you go the next day to get tested for all the other ones and you also get the herpes test, it'll give you a false negative. So people are always like, oh, I know I don't have herpes. I'm like, are you sure? Have you gotten tested? Do you know what your tests include? Because the CDC does not recommend testing for it. And it usually is not covered under insurance. So that's one thing for the people who don't have herpes to understand that. And for people who do have herpes, it's not as bad as you think it is. And I know that sounds like super cliche, but like it gets better over time. And don't isolate yourself. Talk to people, talk to your friends, and shoot your shot. Because if you don't disclose to someone that you like, then you're rejecting yourself before they even have a chance to reject you. Because I was doing that for years where I was like, oh, I can't disclose to that person because they're too attractive or they're too cool or they're my friends with my friend. And all I was doing was rejecting myself and not even giving them the chance to reject me or accept me.
I guess at the same time, it's what you said earlier. You have to accept that you have it,
yeah,
and be educated about it, because honestly, and as we said earlier, the first time you're getting it, waiting a month and then shooting your shot in that sense, a little bit too soon in my personal opinion.
Your confidence level, like it just depends on, like I said, I disclosed and I got a boyfriend out of it. I dated him for a year and a half and it was fine for the most part. I think it depends on how you are personally. Don't throw yourself into a relationship just to think that'll fix yourself, because it doesn't. Like at the end of the day, when you break up with that person, you still have herpes. So you still have to deal with that. Eventually you'll have to deal with it. But just do whatever you feel comfortable doing, as long as you're disclosing. My big thing is I always say disclose. I know a lot of people, my doctor told me I didn't have to disclose, which is crazy. But I always did. I always felt weird. Like I felt like it would be weird to not.
I think it's best to disclose it because at least you give the other person the option.
Yeah. And not only that, but it's part of who I am. So if my significant other is not going to accept all the parts of who I am, because getting herpes shaped part of my personality, because I was so depressed for a whole year where I was like, it kind of shaped how I handle situations and so it's important for them to know. Plus it's always worse to disclose after the fact. I've had so many horror stories of people who like thought they were going to have a one-night stand and like, oh, I take medications. Because if you take antivirals, you don't have an outbreak and use a condom, it's like 0.01% you could pass it. So people are like, oh, it's like 0 chance I'm going to pass it. But if you have that one-night stand and you have like the best time ever, then you have to tell them after the fact. Because if you're going to start dating them, they're going to see your Valtrex on the counter and be like, what's that medicine for? And then you have to tell them after the fact. Way worse. Don't do that. Just get it out of the way in the beginning. No.
That's true. That's very, very true. And that's what I was mentioning earlier. It's the fact that at the end of the day, it's best to, because as you said, like it's nice to go out there and disclose, but at the same time, you would have to still think about what that person might say and what they might do, because they could give negative feedback and that could be bad as well.
Yeah, no, I always went into every disclosure saying, okay, this person might say no. Just like not, I've never had anyone be outwardly mean. I've never had anyone be mean to me. And all the people that in my, like, I'm in a support group with like a bunch of people. I've had people ghost me. I've had people like say, oh no, thank you, but thank you for telling me. But I've never had anyone go, oh my God, you're disgusting. Because think of the type of person that you'd have to be to do that to someone, you know, like, oh no, you're gross. Like that's a really shitty person. They might say that behind your back, but I've never had anyone say that to my face. So the worst, unless you're disclosing to a really shitty person, the worst you're going to get is a no or a ghosting situation. And in the back of your head, you just have to remember, especially on dating apps, people get ghosted every day for things that have nothing to do with herpes. I have gotten ghosted so many times on dating apps without even disclosing yet. Like we're just in the chatting phase. And I got ghosted because the other person found someone better, or the other person, you know, like, so you just have to keep that in the back of your head. It might not have just been the herpes that made them ghost you. It could be for any number of reasons. Because I see that a lot too, where people are like, oh my God, this person ghosted me, it's probably because I have herpes. I'm like, well, my friend's on dating apps and she gets ghosted all the time and she doesn't even have herpes. So it's just, dating apps are shitty in general. I'll give you a couple quick stats on herpes that most people don't know. 1 in 6 adults ages 14 to 65 have genital herpes. So that's 1 in 6 people. So if you have 6 friends, count it out, one of you have it. Condoms do not protect against herpes in most cases because it depends on where your herpes is located. Condoms may not protect you. So just because you're using a condom doesn't mean you're automatically safe. And just because someone has herpes, it's not only their job to discuss sexual health. You should be proactive, ask your partners, because like I said, I've been a slut. I've disclosed to 25 people. Out of the 25 people, not a single person has asked me if I had it. I always have to be the one to bring up the conversation. I always have to be the one to talk about it. And that's not safe for everyone involved. So just be sure, no matter what happens, just talk about it. Because if you're having sex with someone, you should be comfortable enough to ask them, hey, when was the last time you got tested? And I always have to be the one to bring up the conversation. So many people just don't bring it up. It's like, oh, well, I don't have anything, so I'm just not going to say anything. You don't have anything. But that's why people think it's okay to not disclose, is because why I always the one to bring it up. So just protect yourself, look out for yourself, and just get tested and know what's going on. So
awesome. You're absolutely right on that. And I like what you said, though. It's the fact that it doesn't have to be herpes. It could be anything and everything.
Yeah.
You have to disclose, my personal opinion.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like, know your own health and like protect yourself. Like people are like, oh, well, because I ask all my partners, what do they have? And they're like, oh, but you have herpes. Why do you care? I'm like, because I don't want to catch chlamydia, gonorrhea, or any of the other ones. Like, I'm not a Pokemon trainer. I don't want them all. I have the one and I'm good. Like, so you have to like take care of yourself, because you can't trust the other person to take care of you. Just, yeah. I'm
still laughing at the Pokemon training. That's a fantastic reference.
That's yeah.
That was awesome. Lauren, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much.